Good evening. Today's July 18th, 2022. This is the Public Safety Facilities Advisory Committee. Before we get started, we had a couple of folks near and dear to the public safety family community in Auburn pass away recently. Lieutenant Paul Wood, an active member of the Auburn Fire Department, and Trooper Dave Cortez, who was retired, but certainly a friend to the Auburn Police and the Auburn Public Safety, and he is well known as an attorney in town in his retirement life. So we just take a quick moment of silence for those two members of our community we lost. Thank you. Tonight's order, we have an agenda for tonight. We'll call the meeting to order. We'll talk current status of our public safety progress here with the project, discuss some different options that we may have as a committee, possibly take a vote on those options, and then ultimately adjourn. Don't anticipate it for the members of the committee being a very long meeting. I know it's summer, and thank you for everybody for making their way here. But we'll get started. Could someone give us, Julie, would you give us an update as to the current status of the project since we've last met?
Certainly. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you. Thank you for getting together again. So if the committee recalls, at their last meeting several months ago, the committee had a really good discussion and decided that we should try one more time to go out for bid for a parcel for the development of a joint public safety facility. So we did revamp the RFP that we had originally put out about a year ago. And I believe we put out the second RFP in December or January with a couple months leeway to give property owners the opportunity to apply. Part of the revamp of that was to remove some of the restrictions that the committee had asked if maybe that was the reason we weren't getting any bids. So we removed the restriction that had to secure it for a certain amount of time. We removed a couple of other restrictions and just tried to make it easier and more, I guess, user-friendly for a property owner to want to bid. And unfortunately, I did contact local brokers who I know have properties for sale in Auburn, as well as property owners that we thought might be interested. We sent them the RFP, and we did not get any response. The response that I did get back primarily from some of the property owners or their representatives was that they were not interested in selling. So that sends us back to the drawing board again. So at this point, we are here to talk to the committee about option B. And for that, if the fire chief would be so kind as to come up and just reiterate option B. And also just want to remind everyone that we have Matt Salad here with us this evening, our consultant, who's been hanging in there with us for the last couple of years through COVID and all of these tries to get this thing moving. So Matt is also here as a resource and to answer any questions that the chair and the committee members may have. We want to propose to you option 2, which just in summary, we did mention before, and that would be to put a joint public safety facility on the 7 West Street parcel where Fire Rescue Headquarters 2 is currently located. Retain the current Fire Rescue Headquarters on Auburn Street, but make that Station 2 and use the new facility as the headquarters for fire rescue along with the police department. So I just want to point out that here with us this evening is Assistant Town Manager and CFO Ed Kazanovich, who's spoken to this committee before about any financing related issues. We also have our new police chief, Todd Lemon, and our Lieutenant Scott Mills, and soon to be Deputy Chief Scott Mills. That will be coming soon. And again, Fire Chief Coleman, and part of your committee is Deputy Chief Glenn Johnson, and obviously some members of our police department up there with you as well. But I think you have a good representation here of police and fire with Ken Charlton and Stephanie and those that are sitting here. So also, I'm going to have everyone just feel free to jump in and answer any questions. But that's why we're back this evening, is to say that if we want this to move forward, I think we have to look at option B. I think we've spent a lot of time and resources to try to get a property owner to respond to an RFP, to step forward. Some of the parcels that this committee and us were very interested in, my understanding is the owner is either not interested at all or looking at a price that would be outside of the realm of possibility for building a public safety facility. So thank you, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, I don't know if you want to have the chief come up or you just want to start with questions.
While we've got you, just to minimize the back and forth, does anybody have any questions for Ms. Jacobson? Okay, no, it's,
Thank you.
Chief, you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Just to add on to what Julie said, I am comfortable with Plan B. I think I've said from the beginning that if we could find the right parcel, I was in favor of a combined facility and, you know, closing down both fire stations and moving into one, because it does not appear at this point that we're going to be able to obtain a property like that that sort of fits in the middle and doesn't, you know, affect response times. I'm hard pressed to, at this point, recommend the closure of a fire station, not knowing that we have that sort of single property. The other thing that's changed, I guess, over the last couple of years, believe it or not, when we first started this project, is there's been a large push for infrastructure in Drury Square. You know, updating businesses, looking for more, you know, businesses to move in, kind of creating a Drury Square district. Again, not having all the details and not wanting to speculate, but I think that there's a reason that Simon Property is not looking to offload any of their land. And I just have, I guess, some concerns about what the future of that mall property is going to look like. I would have to expect, just in some conversations that I've had over the last couple of years, is that, you know, ultimately, if the mall chooses to close, I think we're going to see a mix of residential and mercantile business in that area. And I would just hate to kind of, you know, pull the neighborhood fire station out of, you know, out of an area that it will probably explode in the next decade in terms of, you know, both residential and business. So this is a plan that I'm comfortable with. Like I said, like Julie said, Matt is here to kind of give some more, you know, context to the looking at what the plan was, utilizing just property we own today, or if we wanted to look at obtaining additional land, what that may look like. But at this point, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for Chief Coleman? Chief Lemon, did you want to give your perspective, the police perspective on the option B plan?
It's been a long time since we've seen each other. So Steve and I talked at length about this, and we had, when the last time you met, we concurred that the town is not land rich, very, you know, land poor, and we all agreed that probably that central location was optimal, but it's not likely to happen. It's not likely to happen at all. And that West Street location where we already own the property will work. And response times, I want to reiterate, for the police department are, we're more mobile than the fire department is. The fire department, with keeping both locations, they're going to be responding from both locations where our officers are deployed after roll call when they go on the road, and they're assigned their various sectors. So that's not an issue for us. And that location will work for us with property that's already owned by the town, with property values going up each year exponentially within the past year and a half or so. That particular portion and parcel, I think if the town and the developer and Tecton, they've done test fits on it, we know it'll work, and I think it's the best option for for public safety and for our citizens.
Any questions for Chief Lemon? Matt, do you want to give us it's been a little bit since we've talked about option B, because our focus was certainly on the, can you give us just a real synopsis of where we were and
So where we had left off, I believe we met just about a year ago, the last time we had talked about this, when we were going to go back out looking at properties. We had put together a couple of test fit options for West Street. One with the parcel as you sort of own it today, and one with the abutter between Southbridge and West Street, and selling that property. So we know that it can work as a combined facility with good egress and good access for both police and fire departments, with room for expansion either way. Certainly, if you have the whole piece, it makes it more feasible or more viable for future expansion. But there was definitely adequate space. Sure, definitely adequate space for it. I think it's a good site. I think there's room to work within it. And it would do so at little impact to the continuing operations within town, especially the way that we had put that test fit together. It's sort of conducive to a phased approach where you'd be able to keep fire operating out of that West Street site while some of that construction work is going on. So I think it's viable. I think the biggest considerations, obviously, moving forward, and we can talk about cost impacts over the past couple of years, but certainly construction cost has escalated at a considerable rate over the past 2 to 3 years since the beginning of the pandemic. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on any of that impact as well. But I think the direction that you're moving with in planning this as option B, where option A didn't work out, was a good move, so that we had something in our back pocket that we know that works, and we do have that option available. So.
Do you have any questions for Matt relative to the project, option B?
Can I ask one question?
Yep.
Just want to make sure I understood what you said. So as owned, the property is fine. I just trying to think back to the schematics. It's been a while. How much of a difference would that additional land make to any expansion or?
What it gained us was a little bit more access directly to Southbridge Street,
Okay.
rather than having to come around with your access. So we were able to have enough space to get a secondary means of egress off the site to Southbridge, but you'd have a little bit more direct access. We could orient the building a little bit differently and pull it away. The biggest challenge that we have with the site is sort of the hill coming up to the middle school. So there'd have to be some retaining walls added to that. I think we had discussed that last year in order to sort of push that hill back and maximize the usable portion of the site. But I think that's in the grand scheme of things, it's all pretty minor.
Thank you.
Other questions for Matt relative to the project? Rick?
So just to be clear, both departments are comfortable if we don't buy, if it turns out that we can't get additional land? Is that what we're saying? Are you comfortable building on the existing land if you have to?
So great question. Not wanting to repeat any previous mistakes that were done in previous years by underbidding or underplanning the project just to make it work. I can honestly tell you that having the additional property on Route 12 with the police department, having a Route 12 facing building with egress and access, like Matt had explained, would be optimal. I'd be remiss if I told you that it wouldn't work any other way, because there's a lot of people, Matt included, that's a lot smarter in this room than I am, that can tell me that can find other options to make it work. But we're running out of answers, and I think this is the best solution overall. A couple of members on the committee know what the problems were with the last station. That particular location being, that Route 12 bifurcates Auburn, runs parallel with Route 20, and so for egress from both sides of Auburn, it's a perfect location. I'm hoping that I'm hoping it works out so we can get a police department and our public safety facility that faces Route 12. I can't tell you for sure that it won't work out any other way. I know it's a bit of a wishy-washy statement, but that's where I'm at right now, hoping that that can happen. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
The other, oh, go ahead.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Ringard. Yeah, I agree with the police chief. I think optimally, I would like to see us pursue some additional space. Because again, I don't think anybody in this room wants to see us in a situation where we're back into a facility or a complex where we're landlocked and we're short on parking and we're sort of starving for a lot of the things that we are today. I don't think anybody wants to see that. So I think I would like to see the committee and the town pursue how we could obtain some additional land. So again, we could have a forward-facing police station to Southbridge Street. The fire station would continue to face to West Street. It would just give us a little more breathing room on the site that although it's a combined facility, it doesn't appear that we're right on top of each other. But with that said, if we pursue that avenue and the only thing that we're left with is, building the facility on the footprint or within the area and the land that we have, I believe, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we talked about some other options where, although you're not going to be able to reduce the footprint of the bay space because that is what it is, but there may be some additional story options on the police side where we could shrink the overall profile of the building and go up in height in order to kind of maybe gain what we're lacking. But I think certainly trying to pursue something that faces Southbridge Street, it may just avoid other construction costs down the road, like the retaining wall that Matt talked about. It would just give us a little more breathing room. But again, outside of that, I just don't know where we else are for options.
One other question, has the school committee had any input? Are they comfortable with this?
So since we last met, we have a new school superintendent. But I can tell you that in previous conversations with Dr. Chamberlain when she was the assistant, that the school department is on board to do whatever we need to facilitate this project, up to and including, and it has been discussed, moving the school department to the existing police station. So that is a conversation that has been had.
Questions for Matt? Matt, could you just touch briefly upon not getting into the whole where we were in building costs, but can you just remind us what the numbers were initially for a combined facility and where what we're calling option B, where the cost was for a split facility? Do you remember rough numbers on that? Because
yeah, so I believe last year when we were looking at this originally, the combined facility was just over 58,000 square feet. And we were looking at total project cost. We're looking at around where we were. Somewhere between 47 and $50 million for the project.
that was for the single facility.
Single facility, correct.
If we would, the project now is moving towards retaining Auburn Street and having just two headquarters at West Street. Wasn't there a square footage reduction in that proposal as opposed to the combined? I seem to remember initially out of the proposals, there was a relatively sizable cost difference.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what the breakdown. Oh, here we go.
Question, I'm confused. So one site at West versus having.
Yeah, well, so my question was, I believe initially the combined, having
Yeah.
building one brand new facility was a certain dollar amount.
But not at West Street, just the first,
The first one.
Okay.
And that's sort of the number I had in my head. I was trying to remember what the cost was.
Yeah, I think the delta was about, was 4 million in savings by doing a single facility.
Okay, so, thank you.
I just don't want to have them build it if they're not happy.
The 40 was for the building, the other 6 were for surveys, fees, things like that, the soft furniture. No.
Was there land acquisition costs in that number, or was it?
Outside of that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kazanovich, did you want to touch upon anything relative to the fiscal end of things, or? If we don't have to, I just, while you're here, I wanted to offer you, while we're talking dollars and cents.
All I can say is this continues to be a moving target. I mean, we know costs have changed as a result of the current economics. What that revised value is, we don't know. Certainly, in order to move forward, whether there's a piece of land acquisition or not, it's going to require a series of approvals by town meeting. And it's going to require a debt exclusion of the voters of the community. Because certainly we couldn't do that within, I'm sure the community wouldn't want to do it within the levy that currently exists. But that's a conversation we would have to have with the Board of Selectmen to see whether or not they would prefer to send this to the voters of the community. So we're going to continue to monitor this. Option B does come with a reduced cost as compared to the original estimates, but you have to factor in the escalation of costs, supplies, and goods in order to construct a smaller facility, but at a higher unit cost. So that's all I have for you tonight.
Thank you.
I think the last time we talked about this,
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, we had a little sidebar because we're trying to answer the question fully. In order to get a true cost on what this project is going to cost, we're going to need to move to the conceptual drawing phase, which is in the budget for Tecton. When we originally appropriated the $150,000 for this project, the conceptual drawings were in that price tag. So in consultation with the town manager, it would be appropriate at this time or later tonight if this committee did want to take a vote to support moving to the conceptual drawing phase. This will need to go back to the Board of Selectmen. We want to have a conversation with the board on that. But if this committee wanted to vote in support of moving to the conceptual drawing phase, that would actually move us in the direction of actually pinning down a dollar amount on what we're looking at for the project.
And Chief, is that where you would, conceptual drawing would start looking at programming things? I know the first one may have had some things, some wish items, which, requires X number of square footage. Are those the time when you start to look at those items? In terms
Yeah, because originally the programming on the first building was for, although we did do one exercise in the very beginning, we've never done a programming exercise on what we're pitching now. We pitched a joint facility with 3 buildings closing into one, and then we pitched 2 new fire stations and a police station. We've never done the programming on the existing. So yes, there are some areas that we will be able to move off of the original program from a square footage perspective. But as Matt pointed out, the conceptual drawing phase is also going to get us better determination on elevation and those kind of things in terms like that retaining wall he talked about. That's really where the rubber is going to meet the road in order to figure out the cost.
Does the committee have any additional questions or discussions, Rick?
So the conceptual drawing would be of the land we own or the,
Yes.
I mean, does the building change substantially if we use our own property or we don't? And if it does, what is your conceptual drawing going to be of? Okay.
Does your budget allow for second conceptual if we own a little bit more than what we own now?
Let me go back and review where we are with our budget and what we have in our contract. And then if there's anything that we need extra in order to do two, then I'll let you know. I'm pretty sure it's one. They're significantly different enough based on the site test fit we provided last year that it'd be quite a bit of extra work to do two full sets of floor plans, elevations, and everything like that. So I'll go back, reevaluate it, and let these guys know sort of where we stand with everything. We're not talking about huge dollars either way.
Thank you.
Just to add, we were just talking, as you're asking the question, we don't want to have two conceptual drawings, which is why we haven't done that so far. Until we had a determination of what option we were going with, we didn't begin that conceptual design phase because you want to make sure you've got the site before you start the conceptual design. That being said, if this truly is the site, is it the site as a standalone, currently town-owned property boundaries? Or is it a site with potentially the purchase of additional abutting land? So I think we have to look at that first to see if we can purchase the land. I think it was pretty clear from the conversation that we had when the committee last met that eminent domain would not be our recommendation, and I don't think the committee was supportive of eminent domain because of the unknown costs and the unknown time that would go into it. So if the town could make a purchase, then we would know what the boundaries were of the land that we would end up with and do a one-time conceptual plan to come up with the costs. That being said, we have had initial conversations with town council. We wanted to see what the committee was going to recommend, but we would have to follow Mass General Law under Chapter 30B and look at what is called, it's similar to a sole source on a procurement of a goods or service, but under a land acquisition or a property acquisition, it's called a unique acquisition, meaning there's no other property that can meet the needs of the town other than one. And you have to prove under the law and under the requirements of Chapter 30B that a particular property that you're looking at would meet the requirements of being a unique acquisition. So if this committee would like us to pursue that, now we can take that next step, work with town council, make that determination to see if it is possible. And if it is possible to go under a unique acquisition clause under Chapter 30B, then the town could enter into a discussion with the property owner. And if the property owner was interested in selling, we could enter into a negotiation for a price. It all then ties back into town meeting and needing approval, like we did with the middle school, to purchase the land and then go forward. But at least it would be a start. We'd know what size the property would be, what the layout is, and which conceptual design we'd have to go with, whether it's, a two-tiered building to accommodate the footprint, or whether it's turning the police station to face Southwood Street opposed to facing west.
Anybody have
You
questions?
answered my question, thank you.
Julie, just while we've got you, so I think we can envision possibly at least two motions to start out, but as a third motion, if you're trying to sell this to town meeting members, I don't know when that component would be. I imagine if they're anything like myself, they're visual folks, and are going to want to see what the proposed design would look like. And again, I don't know at what stage or what process the discussions would be relative to any sort of land acquisition, because I think those are two completely different photographs that you're going to show to town meeting members. So is a potential third motion for conceptual design, is that premature, or is that monies relative to maybe I'm mixing up terminology?
I think you could still take a vote to ask the town administration to advance to conceptual design based upon the anticipated footprint of the property. That would kind of give the recommendation for us to move forward, depending on what we find out, whether it's a unique acquisition. I don't think that's too difficult to determine, although I do think it does take several weeks because there's a lot of information that's required to do that. You have to do a comparison of your parcels that are abutting and show why one is the only one that you can get and that there are no other options. So that does take some time to do. I guess I envision that as much as I'd like to say this would go to a town meeting in May, I guess it all depends on how fast we could do an analysis of the unique acquisition prospect and how fast we could then get conceptual drawings. To your point, Mr. Chair, I think we talked about with the committee before. I think the last thing we want to do is push something through without a proper education and outreach process to the public so they understand what it is, because you're talking about not just a town meeting vote, but you're also talking about a ballot question for the funding of it, to authorize the funding. So I think we have to make sure that we've got the design, we know what we want to do with regard to a purchase of a property or no purchase of a property. And we want to be able to show, like you said, show the voters, show the town meeting members what exactly this would look like, what it consists of, what the ultimate budget is. And I just don't know that that can be all done in time for ballot questions to be prepared, really, which is in March. And a town meeting warrant, I believe that actually closes at the end of February. So it sounds like it's far away, but it's not that far away. So we could aim for that. We could run out a timeline and see how it looks. But there's a couple of variables that we would need to determine. If you didn't do it in May, I don't see any reason you wouldn't be able to do it in the fall.
Thank you. Any additional questions?
And I say you wouldn't be able to do it. I should say Ed would be able to do it in May or the fall.
Anything additional, Chief, Rick? Does anybody have any motions relative to this process?
Go for it.
Okay.
All right, so two motions, got to do them separate, right?
Do them separate, please, yeah.
Okay, so the first motion would be to recommend that the town manager pursue the construction at the existing property on West Street as a one facility, maintaining Auburn Street as a secondary fire station. I'm gonna stop, right?
And then a second on that motion?
I'll second.
All in favor? Discussions, any discussions on the motion rather first? Discussions? No? All in favor? Unanimous? Additional motion relative to this process?
Yes, so I'd like to make a second motion to also recommend that the town manager pursue that property acquisition adjacent with the frontage at, was that Southbridge, Route 12.
Second. Second from Dan Sheldon. Any discussions relative to the motion? All in favor? Unanimous? Julie, you're on a roll, you ready?
I was going to let someone else take a shot at the third because I was a little confused by that one. So that was, let's see, a motion to recommend conceptual drawing based on, was it the potential property that we could acquire? So
Anticipated land
anticipated,
Potential expansion of the property.
which would be, yeah, that one. You can add to it.
Potential expansion of the property.
Potential expansion of property. Could you just try and recite it for, because Rocco's over here trying to write.
My shorthand isn't what I use.
All right, so motion to recommend a conceptual drawing be done for the expansion of the property at West Street.
A second. Kenny, second. Any discussions on the motion for the conceptual drawings? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous as well. Anything else further for our group? Anything else from our members? No? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
JD, second? Rocco, thank you. All in favor? Adjourn. Thank you, everybody.